Welcome. Just as there is a standard story about Martin Luther and the rise of Protestantism, there is also a standard story about Catholicism and its response to the challenges posed by Luther and his supporters. And that standard story goes something like this. Protestants advocated Reformation, so, faced with an unparalleled crisis, the Catholic Church called the Council of Trent, which began in 1545. There the Catholic Church launched the Counter-Reformation, that is, its attempt at opposing Protestantism. But by then, it was too little, too late. Today, I'm going to question this narrative, too. Truth be told, no one in the 16th century spoke of a Protestant Reformation, and no one at the time spoke of a Catholic Counter-Reformation either. No one has yet traced the origin of the term Protestant Reformation, but the term Counter-Reformation appears to have originated in the 18th century. According to the enterprising historian John O'Malley, in his book Trent and All That, it's a term first used by the German Protestant historian Johann Stephan Putter. In fact, to better reflect Putter's view, the English term Counter-Reformation should probably be translated as anti-Reformation. So, Putter advanced the familiar story that Protestants wanted Reformation while Catholics did not. But as we have seen, Reformation was the great keyword of every church council since the early 15th century. And as we'll soon see, it was the great keyword at Trent, too. The separation between Protestantism and Catholicism took place slowly. There was no sudden moment of rupture. A range of theological issues came to separate various Protestant groups from one another, but also from the Catholic Church. But in the beginning, there was simply a twofold debate, first about indulgences, and second about the authority of the Pope. The concern with papal authority rapidly became primary. A good illustration of this can be found in the Vatican Palace. Beginning in 1519 and continuing through 1524, Raphael and those associated with his workshop painted the Sala di Constantino, a series of works on Constantine, the first Christian emperor. They were commissioned by Pope Leo X. Elements of the Sala di Constantino were deeply rooted in the Christian past, but also influential was the donation of Constantine. We see Raphael's portrayal of the donation here. Constantine kneels, indicating fealty and subservience, as he hands the Pope the entire western half of the Roman Empire. Lorenzo Valla had written his work discrediting the donation almost 75 years earlier. However, the work was not printed at the time because the printing press did not yet exist. But it had appeared by the end of the first decade of the 16th century. Martin Luther read it, and it helped inspire Luther's opposition to the papacy. But we also have to be careful. Valla's work is now accepted as true, but in the early 16th century, his work was a matter of debate. It's clear, however, that the Pope had his own view, and the Sala di Constantino reflects it. Here the donation of Constantine was treated as factually true. The painting is, therefore, a very blunt statement of papal primacy. The Council of Trent met in 3 periods. It was initiated by Pope Paul III. The first period began in 1545 and ended in 1547. The second period began in 1551 and ended in 1552. The last began in 1562 and ended in 1563. Attendance at the council was quite poor. The first period began with only 29 bishops present, and yet there were more than 700 Catholic bishops in Western Europe. The second period was even worse, beginning with only 15 bishops, and neither of these sessions saw attendance above 100 bishops. In the last months of Trent's third period, attendance peaked at 280. But even here, at its most well attended, Trent still had fewer bishops than the Fifth Lateran Council. And interestingly, no pope ever attended Trent. Nonetheless, Trent defined Roman Catholicism into the late 19th century. Although 4 councils were called, between 1414, when Constance began, and 1563, when Trent ended, the next council after Trent happened more than 300 years later. At Trent, we again see the great keyword Reformation. In fact, we see this in the council's opening session, which stated that the council met for the praise and glory of the Holy and Undivided Trinity, Father and Son and Holy Spirit, for the increase and advance in esteem of the faith and Christian religion, for the uprooting of heresies, for the peace and unity of the Church, for the reformation of the clergy and the Christian people, for the crushing and complete removal of the enemies of the Christian name. Across its 3 sessions, Trent passed multiple decrees for reformation, especially of the clergy and sacramental rites. Reformation was used to address simony, that is, bribery in the church, usually to secure some sort of clerical office. Marital practices were also listed for reformation. In some way, the Catholic Church merely restated old opinions. For example, that the only valid marriage is one entered into freely. But the council also attacked the practice of concubinage with new vigor. Long story short, the Council of Trent was very much a reformation of the Roman Catholic Church. Trent's approach to Protestants was idiosyncratic. Protestants were not invited to the first period of the council. However, a general invitation was made to German Protestants on October 11, 1551, at the 13th session, which met during the council's second period. The council promised that Protestants, quote, may be able and ready to deliberate with all freedom, to propose and discuss and offer, in writing or in speech, as many points as they shall choose, and hold debate without any violent abuse or invective. But Protestants did not attend. Trent issued another general invitation on March 4, 1562, at its 18th session, which met during its third period. Here more than just German Protestants were invited. The council addressed, quote, each and all who are not in communion with us in matters of faith, from whatever kingdoms, nations, provinces, cities, and places they come. But again, Protestants refused. They were mistrustful of the council, and so an opportunity for religious concord was lost. Some of the issues raised by Protestants were addressed by Trent, and some were not. Most importantly, Trent completely sidestepped the issue of papal authority. It was, without question, the most contentious issue of the day. Trent's silence on points even meant ignoring Catholics with conciliar inclinations. Other issues also had a larger 15th century backdrop. Protestants wanted married clergy, but Trent rejected this. Like Lateran V, Protestants called for vernacular liturgy. Unlike Lateran V, Trent not only rejected vernacular liturgy, but condemned its use. So, due in part to both of these issues, the marriage of clergy and vernacular church services, very distinct Protestant cultures developed, in some ways quite different from Catholicism. Trent was closer to Protestants, however, on the issue of vernacular Bibles. Lateran V had discussed this too. Trent allowed for vernacular Bibles with 2 provisos. First, the translation had to be based on the Vulgate, and second, the translation had to be checked and approved by an ecclesial authority. One result was a proliferation of Bibles, but this also meant that Protestant translations were not used by Catholics, and Catholic translations were not used by Protestants. So what? A lot came out of the Council of Trent. I want to look briefly at 3 outcomes. First, and unlike Protestantism, the Catholic Church gave a greater space to women's religious voices. Here we see the Spanish nun, Saint Teresa of Avila, experiencing religious ecstasy. Catholics remained more open than Protestants to the possibility of miracles, including ecstatic religious experiences. such as visions, prophecy, and healing. Teresa of Avila was one of the great female visionaries in 16th century Catholicism, and her various writings exercised a deep influence upon Catholic piety. Second, Catholics had long sent missionaries to different parts of the world, but following Trent, a new wave of Catholic missions swept across the globe. Here we see a print from a mission to China. Other missions went to Japan, various parts of Africa, and of course to the Americas. In this, Catholics and Protestants were quite different. Protestants initially engaged in no missionary activity. The first Protestant mission societies date only to the 18th century. Finally, even as it became more global, the leadership of the Catholic Church became more Italian. It was a trend that first began after the Council of Basel, but it intensified in the 16th century. In fact, from 1559 onward, 2/3 of cardinals were Italian. This remained true through the end of the 18th century. By then, of course, some portions of Europe were long Protestant, of one sort or another: England, Scotland, portions of Germany, the Netherlands, Scandinavia. But this still left very large Catholic areas, other than Italy, the most important of which were Spain and France, the greatest imperial powers in Europe during the 16th and 17th centuries respectively. Trent did nothing to change this trend. Increasingly global in its membership, the Catholic Church was increasingly parochial in its leadership. If you're interested in learning more, these books are worth consulting. First is one of 2 books by John W. O'Malley. His 1993 volume, Trent and All That, traces the idea of the Counter-Reformation. Locating it in the 18th century, O'Malley proposes that we do away with the label. His second key book is Trent, A History of the Council. It's an excellent and readable history, and probably the most up-to-date study currently available in English. Last is Miles Pattenden's insightful work, Electing the Pope in Early Modern Italy, 1450 to 1700. Its approach is one that I fully support because it begins in the 15th century and traces the increasingly Italian nature of European Catholic leadership beginning after the Council of Basel. That's all for now. Thanks so much for watching. Please hit the subscribe button, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll see you next time. So, no one at the time used the term Protestant Reformation, and no one at the time used the term Counter-Reformation.